you're gonna look great. But if you wanna stay in shape, well, you better hit the GymWits.
That's right, man. Tell 'em.
Welcome to the GymWits podcast. I'm Ryan George.
I'm Justin Guild, a.k.a. Chef Sonic.
And we are the GymWits.
So I learned a valuable lesson that I've often taught myself in the past. But sometimes, it never takes one time to reinforce a lesson. You got to burn your hand a couple times. So I bought a big bag of chips that I said I wasn't going to eat the whole bag when I brought it with me to work, and I ate the whole bag. So the moral of the story is don't trust yourself to not eat the whole huge bag of chips. Just take a little baggie and put a small portion in there, or else you will eat the full bag of chips.
That's a lesson I've learned over and over. I just know, I don't even try to convince myself otherwise. It's like if I buy any size of anything, I just expect that I'm going to eat the whole thing, and that's that.
It's an interesting concept, and I felt terrible for eating the full bag of chips, but I did. So.
Yeah.
Just next time I won't make that mistake.
Yeah, no, it's tough. But you know yourself, so you kind of have to know, you know your limits, you know what you're capable of, and you know what to do to kind of, I guess, avoid those situations. So, anyway. I'm in a rush, so we're gonna get right to our interview today. It's actually a really good interview. I know some people, just looking at our numbers, it's interesting when we do things that are not necessarily, about losing fat or gaining muscle. We'll see definitely a difference versus if it's entrepreneurship or eating. Healthy snack, whatever it is. We definitely see a difference, but this is a really, really interesting interview, especially if you're a fitness professional or if you're in any kind of business. Really great advice as far as kind of getting started with, starting a business, especially in fitness. And I know we have a lot of trainers and fitness pros that are listeners to the podcast, so I highly recommend it. Even if you're somebody who kind of selectively chooses the episodes, definitely one of our favorite, interviews. I think we have, definitely I think a top 5 for me. So nice. Definitely worth listening to. We had a really great time. You're going to pronounce his name? What?
Yes, his name is Matthew Januszek, and he's awesome. And we're very excited for you guys to listen to this interview. So here is our interview with Matthew. Hey everyone, we are here with Matthew Januszek. How's everything, Matthew?
Yeah, very good. Thank you very much.
Nice. So we were a little worried about making sure that we had your name pronounced properly. So that's a Polish name?
It is. Come on, show me how you're going to pronounce it now. I've got to test you.
Oh, no. Yeah, I mentioned it briefly. All right. Let's see. Ryan, you want to give a whirl at this one?
What?
You want to try to pronounce last name properly?
You mean, no.
All right. Januszek.
Yeah, that's it. Well done.
Nice. All right. I hope I did
it's pretty simple. Right. The Z throws people, I guess. When you put a Z or Z as you would say in America, as I'm learning.
But I noticed that you have a British accent.
Yeah, I'm originally from England, nice. But living now in sunny California.
Oh, nice.
Oh, nice. How long have you been in California?
Just over a year, and I'm enjoying it a lot.
Cool. Certainly, probably better weather than in many parts of England, and certainly better than in New York, which we always complain about. Yeah,
yeah, I think New York's pretty similar to where we're from in the UK, but maybe it gets a bit colder in the winter from what I've experienced.
Yeah, I actually have a friend from the UK who came in yesterday, and he was basically saying, the weather right now is in New York, at least, is what it is in the UK, except he said it's a little colder right now in the UK, but still kind of dreary, raining.
Yep.
Right. Yeah.
Get used to it. That's become a tradition. We always complain about it pretty much every episode. All right. So the first thing we always ask is, I guess also another tradition, is about your fitness background and how you got started with fitness.
Yeah. Well, I started. I had an interest when I was pretty young. I guess thinking back around about 15. So I wasn't particularly great or interested at school. So any opportunity I had to kind of be at home a little bit longer, I would. And I remember when I was 15, I was roller skating, fell off my roller skates, damaged my ligaments, and so I got a week off school, which was great. And I spent that week watching Pumping Iron. I think every day I must have watched it about 4 or 5 times, and I think that was a moment where I kind of realized that I wanted to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. I wanted to stand up on stage and be Mr. Olympia. So I think that's probably my earliest memory of being inspired by fitness, and then I managed to talk my parents into buying me for Christmas I don't know if you have them over here, but this sort of plastic red concrete filled dumbbells and disc set that did you have those as a kid?
No,
you didn't. I'm showing my age now.
There were we just sort of had if you bought your own dumbbells, they were just the sort of standard, with a weight set and the little and whatever sort of clips that you had. I think the big development was when they came out with those dumbbells that were part of the set. What do you call those? Where you could like just change the weight. They're sort of cube-ish.
Oh,
right.
The power blocks?
The power blocks. Yeah, that was sort of the big development. We were a little older by then.
That's more recent. Yeah.
Yeah, that's been pretty well. Yeah, a little more recent. So, yeah, the big development for Ryan and I was just joining a gym.
Right. Yeah. So I had my parents got me one of those, and
nice.
And I just started lifting in the garage, and we had this sort of. I remember my dad at the time was doing some building maintenance work, and we had these. It was like a 6 foot by 4 foot piece of plywood, and at the time they didn't buy me a bench. They just bought me these weights. So I remember having some paint pots that he was painting with. I got 4 of those, one on each corner, and this 6 by 4 board, and that was my bench. And every time I tried to do bench press or flies, I realized that the width of the board was wider than my elbow, so it was always pretty uncomfortable to try and do any sort of flies or any kind of lying stuff on there. So I kind of built my gym
Nice.
very slowly from our garage.
Yeah, now people have it easy. You could just get one of those like home gyms, or just go online and you have a million different exercise programs to choose from. So, but back then you had to really work for it, right?
Yeah, well, we didn't have too much money when I was younger, so you kind of had to sort of make stuff. That was really how we got by.
Did you play sports at that time too, or was it mostly kind of the weightlifting and bodybuilding for you?
No, I wasn't big into sports. We did the normal stuff at school, which was as you guys call soccer or football, which I wasn't particularly good at. Basketball, I tended to like because it was inside and it was warm, as opposed to the sports in England always used to happen, which was quite weird in the winter. So rugby and football was always when it was raining, and then the athletics, which was quite nice, where you'd go out in the summer and do all your sort of your running and that kind of stuff. So I like the summer stuff, but not so much running in a wet, muddy field in the winter. That didn't really appeal to me.
I can imagine. So, and it's funny how many people cite Pumping Iron as their inspiration. That even it's almost 50 years old, that documentary, and yet people are still it's still relevant in a weird way.
Yeah, it is really. I speak to a lot of people, and I've also heard that either Arnold Schwarzenegger or Pumping Iron inspired them to get into some form of sort of sport or fitness or bodybuilding or whatever, which is kind of the direction I went into. Competing as a junior bodybuilder, as I sort of became a teenager. But yeah, I guess at his time, bodybuilding was probably very new. It was either aerobics on one side or bodybuilding on the other. And I guess as a teenager, there was the magazines and there in the movies. It was something that was very prevalent at the time. I guess you could compare it to maybe like CrossFit of today, sure. Or UFC. That's the sort of body that everybody aspires to have or to look like. So yeah, interesting.
So I'm curious, what do you think of the bodybuilders of today, like someone like Phil Heath, as compared to the sort of more older school, 70s, 80s bodybuilders?
Yeah, I guess for me and I've not followed it as much recently as I did years ago, but I was always more the fan of the kind of Frank Zane look. In fact, I interviewed him myself a few months ago, and I think that's more of a classic, balanced, athletic type of physique. I guess now it's quite extreme, which I guess is where it needs to go. I'm sure it's right for certain people, but for me, I guess being able to look good, but also perform, then the more leaner physique is probably a lot more practical. I remember even when I was training, and I wasn't that big, but you don't move around very quickly, and you're not got much movement in you when you're that kind of size, I guess.
Do you think it'll ever rebound? Like, do you think we'll ever get to a point where we get back to like really focusing on the physique, or is it one of those like you can't put toothpaste back in the tube type situations where guys will just get bigger and bigger and more massive, and it'll just kind of keep moving that direction?
I think we're seeing a change. I don't know what the federation's called, but certainly we see, and we're involved a lot more in the kind of physique type of competitions where the guys wear the sort of what do they call them, like the sort of swimming trunks, the longer trunks, and they're a lot slimmer and leaner. So you're certainly seeing that coming around. How successful and popular the things like the competitions for the really big people are, I don't know, but I think if you look at what's happening, trends, if you look at the big sports that are out there that people see and are in the news all the time, UFC, I guess, is extremely popular. And if you look at the physiques of people that do UFC or even CrossFit, then certainly in my experience, those that if you ask somebody what would be their perfect body, then that seems to be the type of shape that people want to have. Has been my experience anyway.
Cool. So I guess getting to your own career, as someone who kind of, I guess, grew up with heavily involved in fitness and bodybuilding and weightlifting, how did you make that transition, to fitness as a career?
Interesting question. So I was, as I said, I was always interested in fitness at a young age. Didn't particularly like school, but the one thing that I did enjoy at school, and the one qualification I got, and I'm not using this as an example that anyone should follow, and I certainly wouldn't recommend my children to do it. I think it's important to do well, but I was more creative, and so the one exam I got was when I think I was about 15 or 16, which was in what they called at the time woodwork and metalwork. And so I managed to get a load of old school chairs and desks and cut them to pieces and weld them together and create a set of squat stands and an adjustable bench. And I passed and left school as soon as possible, really, once I got my qualification. So I think at a young age, I realized I kind of like making things and I like fitness. And I guess I went on a journey to find a way of putting those things together, and so I worked in a dental business, which was for my grandfather's for a while, and I didn't really enjoy that, but it gave me a good understanding of running a business and sales and marketing and bringing in customers and looking after customers and working with people. And then in the evenings, I used to do what I kind of enjoyed, which I used to work in bars and nightclubs as what we call in England a bouncer or a doorman. Yep. And that allowed me to hang around the guys that used to be either owning gyms or working in gyms or competing. So I could learn about what to eat and how to do my posing and different types of training and to get new training partners. So I guess through my sort of teenage years, I did a day job to, earn some money, and then I did an evening job to earn some money, but sort of, combine that with my passion for fitness. And I did that, I guess, up until my early 20s. Couldn't really find out what I wanted to do, but I guess when you're young, in my experience, it was more about enjoying life and meeting girls and having fun and working out. So what more is there to life than that?
Sounds like part of my life as well.
And then as I got into my 20s, I thought, I I need to do something. I need to do something in my life. And I always sort of, very close family with my sort of my dad in particular. And we always used to talk about looking for some business that we could set up with the family, some kind of family business. He was working for a company and wanted to do something on his own, and I wanted to get into something that I felt I could, throw myself into. And I was in the gym one day, sitting there on a corner of I remember it very clearly, sitting on a bench press, a flat bench, and just in between sets, and looking over to the left. And in the gym in those days, you'd have the bodybuilders that would work out in one side, and it was just literally weights and dumbbells. And on the other side, you had the kind of real weightlifters, which these are the guys who did the Olympic lifting, and they would be, they would almost be seen as a sort of a higher level than the bodybuilders because they took it seriously. And I remember looking at the weights that they were using, and they had Poland written on the side. And it just this idea came into my head, and I went back to my father that evening, who's Polish, and I said, look, have we got any relatives that are in Poland? Because I've got this idea for a business. If you could find out where they make these weight plates, then I can, we can bring them into England, and I can go and knock on doors on gyms and sell them, because every gym has weight plates. And that was really my very high level, sophisticated business plan. And my dad sort of seemed to think it was a good idea as well. So I remember every evening he would be on the phone brushing up on his Polish, because he didn't need to speak to it. So he's learning all these sort of technical words and calling people. And we did that for a long time. And eventually I think he found a factory, which we went over to see, managed to locate where they made these plates. And we started to bring them into England. And although there was a long process in between actually, that idea of making money, that was really how we started our business.
It's a nice story. And there's one thing that I think I missed in there. What did you feel was the need for those plates? Why did you feel that there was a need for them?
Yeah, well, I think at the time, like now as I've been in business for quite a number of years now, and as I've gone through, you sort of get these questions that you would ask. If someone comes to us with a new product idea or an opportunity, then you kind of have this quite scientific way of analyzing what works and what doesn't and what you should do. But at the time, it was purely a case of, we had this idea, we wanted to do a business. I loved gyms and weightlifting. I thought that the stuff that was sold into gyms was made in Poland, which my dad had a passion for doing some business with, and that was it. So I didn't really think of am I solving a need? It was purely a passion product where I thought, if I can find out where these make these, then I've got an excuse to stop doing what I'm doing and not start talking to gym owners and hang around in gyms and do something that I really, really wanted. So I suppose what I should have done and what I would do now is to say, well, is there really a big market for it? How big is the market? That kind of came later. And just fortunately, it was we picked on an industry that was continuing to grow quite rapidly.
Yeah. So you found success initially with that initial idea, getting the plates into the market?
Yeah, we started off with bumper plates, and at the time it was what we realized shortly after is that bumper plates were they're suddenly very popular now. Within the last 5 years, CrossFit have made them extremely popular. But if you think about 10 years, even 15 years ago, you didn't see them in gyms. So we I had this idea of bumper plates being what gyms needed, but it actually wasn't. And going back when the business started just over 20 years ago, the gyms were about 60 to 70% cardio. So what you were doing is getting these new types of fitness centers that were almost like very cardio based, because at the time that was really what you needed to get in shape. So you'd have treadmills and bikes. You'd have machines, fixed machines, and then you'd have a really, really small free weight area, because that wasn't popular. And in some of the clubs in England, they even thought that free weights were dangerous and members couldn't be left on their own. So some gyms at the time actually took the free weights out of the area. So we kind of came up with this idea that we thought was popular, and we were almost like at a stage in the industry where it wasn't quite as popular as it needed to be. So we took the concept of making a disc, which was a piece of steel with rubber around it, and then we said, well, actually, we can, if we make these discs smaller and put them together and put a bar in the middle, we can create a dumbbell. So we went from discs to dumbbells, and then people need racks, and over that period of time, we've expanded into kind of a lot of different areas. And fortunately, the direction that we started in is the direction that the industry moved, which is at, using free weights and kettlebells and ropes and bars, which I started off, 30 years ago when that's the type of training I was doing back then.
Now, do you work with the same manufacturer that you initially had reached out to, or have you since, or even are they still around?
No, that things changed a lot.
Yeah.
So we now own quite a few of our own factories. So my father is an engineer, so we started, buying them from different companies, and then we outgrew those, and we found other companies, and we outgrew those, and then we went out to Asia and went through the normal challenges of buying from Asian companies, and then we decided to sort of partner with someone, and we set up our own manufacturing facility, which again was thinking back, about going into that is probably something we wouldn't have ever imagined doing, but it was a good move, and it kind of allowed us to be a little bit more self-sufficient and in control of what we do, which is important for our business.
So I'm sort of going to put you on the spot with this question, or is that sort of a two-part question? And maybe this would even change from day to day, your response. But as an entrepreneur, what are sort of your, I know this could be extensive, but what are the best tips that you can give aspiring entrepreneurs? And also, I guess the second part, what were some mistakes that you made that you could almost warn people about?
Yeah. Well, how long you got? I think I'll address the first one. The first one first. I think in terms of what was it? What kind of lessons? What were some of the lessons? Was it?
It's I love the one of my favorite quotes from one of my favorite authors, writers. Oscar Wilde says that experience is the name that we give to failure. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's very true. I think, in terms of what advice or experiences I've had, there's many different things, but I think the first, if I was to narrow it down and to probably sort of focus on a few things that I guess most people don't realize when they're going into it, and certainly in the if you look at where we are today with the internet and a lot of the things you can read on social media or on YouTube about being able to be super successful in 60 days or in 6 months or in 1 year and being able to drive around in a Lamborghini. I think I've met and interviewed a lot of people and that have been very successful, and I've never met anyone that, unless they happen to win the lottery or just were in a very unique situation that's happened to them. Most of the people, and even the ones that have succeeded on a massive level quite quickly, have generally had a sort of a 10-year story that leads up to that moment of them having an overnight success. So I think the first thing that people, particularly sort of younger entrepreneurs that I speak to, is important that they realize is that there's no such thing as an overnight success, and getting into any kind of business, you've got to go into it with your eyes wide open, and you've got to be prepared to work extremely hard. You've got to be prepared to work without making a lot of money for a pretty decent amount of time, and you've got to be committed that whatever comes in front of you to stop you, and there'll be lots of those things that you're going to continue to go through that and to be successful. So I think the first thing is the not kind of being not going into it to think that you're getting into business to make loads of money really, really quickly and have a Lambo and have that type of lifestyle, because that will come, but it's going to take some time. I think that's probably the sort of first and most important one that people get a little bit sort of misguided on. I don't know whether you've sort of heard or experienced that before at all.
Oh, sure. Oh, yes.
Yeah. So I think that's the first one, and then And then the second one, being an entrepreneur, it's a very lonely business. You're most of the time, particularly when you're starting, there is, it's yourself, maybe one or two other people that you get to come along and help. In my case, my mum used to help me out part time. She would be, there's four of us in the family, and she would be doing a normal stuff and picking up the phone when it came, and we get very excited that someone's on the phone. But I kind of had my mum doing it to make people think that we're a bigger company, and we had we had other people other than myself. So it's a lonely process, and you've got to. I think people need to spend that time on their mindset, because you come off the back of a small failure or lost order or dealing with the banks or cash flow or whatever, and you've got to be able to quickly pick yourself up mentally, or you can spend a lot of time going through a very painful mental experience, which I've done as well, and but however you look at the situation, affects how you feel, but the situation is still as it is, and you can either deal with that situation in a positive, strong mental state, or you can deal with that situation in a sort of a rundown, beaten up, struggling mental state, and the ability to go through each one of those is you've got complete choice of which mindset you use to assist you. So being able to kind of have some time and to be able to sort of almost train on your mind like you do with your body is an extremely important thing to do, and that's something that whatever stage of your business is something is really important to make that time and to be able to sort of look at things in the right way and from the right mental perspective.
So now, I guess my question kind of piggybacks a little bit off of Justin's question, is when it comes to kind of bringing a fitness product to market, because I think everyone has a great idea and has something they want to get out there, and I think there's some great ideas that just fizzle out because people just don't do the right thing. There's some not so great ideas that do well because of whether it's marketing or timing, whatever the case is. So I guess what unique challenges maybe does the fitness industry present when bringing a product to market? And I guess what advice would you have on that? And full disclosure, Justin and I are actually working on a product, so it'll definitely help us because we're kind of in the process of getting something together that we hope to get to market in the next year or so. So what advice do you have for us?
Yeah, okay. Well, the first thing, as much as people think it's just about the idea or the product, that's probably not really that relevant. We get people bringing to us. I would say, on each week we'll probably have 2 or 3 different ideas that people bring to us, and some of them are pretty good ideas. Some of them are awful and we'll never get anywhere. But in a lot of cases, 20% of what we have in is a decent idea. And so for a company like ours, we've probably got around about 1,000 SKUs, and out of those, there's several hundred products within it. So we've got a lot of items that we work with, and it's really about picking the ones that you think are going to be successful. And so to kind of lead on to your question, I think you've got to have a good idea. The product's got to be novel in some respect. It's got to have a reason for people to sort of look at you over someone else. So that does play a part. The other thing that we look for is how easy is it for, if it is a good idea and it's successful, how easy is it for somebody else to do a version? Because unless you can protect it in some way, or you've got some very unique manufacturing capability, which is pretty rare these days, or you've got a very unique way of packaging it, then unless you're able to get to market super quick, you're going to have a bunch of these out there very, very quickly, and we've been and experienced that many times. So you've got to have an interesting idea that's quite novel. You've got to be able to protect that idea, because you could be the ones that go out, take it to market, show everybody how great it is, and then it's, that's a good idea, I'm going to do mine. I'm already established in the industry, and I can sort of beat you to it. And then it's how to there's different types of products. You've got products which I would say are things that people quickly understand. So let's say a kettlebell. Maybe you came up with a kettlebell for the home that could be, you could adjust the weight and you could change the handle, and there's a few funky things that you could do with it. But if you spoke to someone about it and said, I've got this funky kettlebell, then it's an easy sell. People know what a kettlebell is, and they're going to quickly jump on the back of it. But if you've got this sort of crazy ab gizmo that people have never seen before, and you have to work out with it in a unique way, and there's a unique training system, then that's a lot more difficult to get people to be able to buy it. That your marketing is going to be a lot more complex. You've got to tell a story and explain the story. It's good in some ways, because if you can make that work, then it's very difficult for people to probably imitate it as easily, but it's a lot more difficult to get it out to a lot of people, and unless you're really good at social media, or unless you can partner up with someone that's going to have the ability to get it out there very, very quickly and tell that story. So I think those are the key things. And then beyond that, looking at manufacturing, then where you're making it, what are the price points? Is it a price that people are prepared to pay? Are you going to be selling it direct, or are you going to be working through distributors? If you're working through distributors, is your margin structure right, so that everybody can make the right amount of money from the different product? And then I guess probably this should come a little bit sooner, but who is it you're selling to? What's your core audience, and what markets do you want to be selling it? Because that will affect the countries that you create your IP around. Creating IP is very, very expensive. So if you want to do it in the US, that's fine. But then if you want to take it internationally and you believe there's an opportunity, then you're suddenly getting involved in a lot of money. And you kind of have to make those decisions fairly early on. So I think, although we started our business totally different to that, as we've got bigger, you really want to think out where you want to be over, probably the next 3 to 5 years, and get some of these things in place. I've really simplified it and shortened it. There's certainly a lot to think about. And if anybody's got a product and wants some help, and I'm happy within reason to be able to sort of, maybe have a few, a bit more detailed conversations with somebody, potentially.
Cool. You had a captive audience there. That was some great advice.
That is great advice. One detail about there's actually so much in what you said that we've been worried about. We're certainly worrying about imitations, because we feel like our product is we haven't found anything like it, and it's very simple. So we're just worried that if the second it goes on, someone is just going to say, oh, well, I can do this with one little change to it. And, we've been worried about, we're working on patents and all that stuff. So the whole thing is a very daunting task. So that's certainly one thing we've been concerned about. Well, another thing that we've sort of also been wondering, and we'll have to pay you a consulting fee, is you talked about the price, and we've been wondering about the price point, because we see certain items sold and we're like, that's a bunch of cheap plastic colored red, and they're selling it for $50 a pop. And then you see items that might be in an infomercial or something like that are significantly cheaper, that look like they're better products. And so I'm really curious as to how the industry, the fitness industry especially, decides on the prices for their products, because some are very cheap but they charge a lot, and some seem to be more and then seem to be reasonably priced.
There's several different business models, and it depends on what market you're selling to. So if you are selling to the consumer market, it's a very high volume, potentially low margin business, depending on how how many people are in the chain. And if you're selling into the commercial market, it's generally a lot lower volume. And when in terms of support and warranties that you have to offer, you've got to have enough money in it to support them. So when people look at a product and say, oh, I've seen that on Alibaba or eBay or whatever, and I can buy it for like $10 or $20 and it's being sold for X. What you've got to realize is that there's a lot of other things that are built into those margins that people don't always take in for granted. So, just simple things like bringing it into the freight, for example. Freight is pretty expensive, and then when you get it in, you've got duties, and then you've got to warehouse the product. Then potentially you may have some sort of reseller in between you, if you're just an importer, a wholesaler, and then you could have a reseller that maybe has a store, bricks and mortar store or e-commerce store, and they're doing ads. So they want to make some money out of the product, for example. You need to make sure that if there is any issues or servicing, you're able to look after the customer and supply it, because if you are going to Asia and you're not experienced, which a lot of people who do it aren't, then some of the Asian factories are not that great, so you're going to have to be prepared to pay for some of this out of your pocket, because they won't necessarily support you. So there are a lot of things to take into consideration when making your pricing, and just because you've got it at a certain price and say, well, I only want to make 20% or something, you've got to, I guess, get with someone that kind of understands all the different elements that are in there. Otherwise, you'll be selling thousands of units, which can happen, and then realize that you're not making any money. And it's very difficult then to go and suddenly put in a huge price increase if something like that happens. And that does happen regularly when you're buying from Asia. It's material issues and shortages and oil prices. They all affect prices, and the factories will just put they can put their prices up quite quickly. So you've got to make sure you're covered on that. And also exchange rates. They, depending on where you're selling, the Chinese currency changes against the US dollar, and you've got to be thinking about that as well. So I guess there's no simple answer, but and I don't know what products you're referring to, but you've got to understand the model that you need to go to market. You need someone to help you to understand all those different bits within the within your profit that you've got to take out, and then base the price accordingly. And the other thing you're doing, if you are buying and selling products, you need a lot of cash, because you're prepaying for these products potentially before they even start production. So by the time you've got it into your warehouse, that could be 60, even 90 days potentially, and then you need to sell it, so you could be another 60 or 90 days. So somebody's got to, unless you've got it yourself, lend you that money. And as we know, money's cheap, but it's not free. So there's a few things to consider.
Wow. It's really making me think about everything. Now, what do you think about Kickstarter and that whole crowdfunding concept? And do you think that I've heard that it devalues a product. Do you believe that? And what do you think about going the Kickstarter route?
Yeah, I've personally, I've not been involved in it. So my knowledge is fairly limited for it. And I've spoke to people that have had success, and I've spoke to people that haven't had success. So I don't know totally. I guess that, if I was to do it, then it would be, if you want funding for a product, then, I would suggest looking at people that, friends and family, which is an obvious one. If you can get some sort of support from people that may have not just money to give you and then get pretty annoyed if they don't make the returns, but if you can get some sort of partner, maybe a small, if it's just a small product, maybe a small company that's sort of in this business that would be happy to get involved, and you cut some sort of deal where they've got an interest and you've got an interest, and if they've already been doing it, then they can probably help you with a lot of the stuff that you're not going to know until you got into it, and you've probably lost a lot of money. That's how you get your experience. You basically pay for it indirectly. So I would suggest, maybe looking at other companies that you have been recommended to, that have got good reputations, where you can sit down and say, look, could we potentially work together in somehow? I think that's probably, in my mind, more effective. But I don't know enough about the platform, and I may not be doing it justice.
That sounds about right. I think from what the kind of my own experience with it and what I've researched as well. So now, I guess a question for you, kind of as an entrepreneur, what lessons did bodybuilding teach you that transferred over to being an entrepreneur?
Well, in terms of there's probably a couple of different ways. In terms of me personally, I guess one of the stories that always sort of sticks with me really is that I was training for a competition, and I had a guy that was he was my, I suppose, inspiration when I was younger. He was 6'2", solid muscle, ripped. He had the kind of body that I looked up to, and when I first came in the gym, he was the biggest guy in the gym, and I thought, one day I want to train with him. I want him to be my training partner, and as it happened, he was, and we started training together. His girlfriend was doing one of the physique competitions, and I was doing the junior, and so we trained together until it was kind of getting quite, I can't remember exactly how far out, but it was in quite an important part of my preparation. And he said, look, we've got a lot going on with my girlfriend and her competition. We're not going to, I'm not going to be able to train with you now. And so years ago, I couldn't afford a personal trainer. So your training partner was your motivation. They were the ones that just got you in the gym. I'd finish work at 7, and then I'd go to the gym, and it was cold and it was dark. And so being used to always having a partner that was going to meet you there and, get you to do those extra couple of reps was, mentally, that's kind of what you needed when you wanted to win a competition. So suddenly at that point, not to have a training partner and knowing what your options are for the other people who probably weren't going to push me as much as what this person did, I had to kind of really shift my mindset. And I remember going in the gym one evening, and it was a terrible workout. And I thought, I'm going to have to do something about this. I'm going to have to work out a way of getting myself engaged without a partner. I'm going to just have to accept that. And I went back and thought it through. And it was that point where I sort of made the decision that, look, I don't need a training partner. I can do it on my own. And if someone wants to jump in with me, great. But I'm going to create that level of motivation from inside of me to push myself just as hard as I had somebody externally to push me. And I think in business it's very similar. As an entrepreneur, no one's there telling you, do one more rep, do that a little bit better, push that a little bit better. You've not got a boss or anybody to tell you to do that. So if you want to be the best in your business, if you want to be a market leader and be the most successful company you can be, then you have to be your own internal, I guess, coach or training partner. You have to be saying, right, come on, one more rep, just push it. And I guess that's it's probably one of the big lessons I got from bodybuilding. And even to this day, in our brand manual on the back, we've got the statement is literally one more rep. That's on the back of our brand manual, and it just really means, okay, when everybody else thinks they're finished, we're going to do one more, and not because anyone's telling you, because you're doing it because nobody's looking. You're doing it off your own back.
Cool. So now, can you tell us? I know you talked a little bit about it, but can you tell us a little bit about your business now? Has it evolved to the current day? And are there any interesting, cool new products that you've got, or products or projects that you might have going on?
Yeah, so we started, as I said, in a spare bedroom. We didn't, very similar to probably you guys. I was doing it with my dad, as opposed to like you guys, a couple of mates. And so we started with a spare bedroom, and we didn't have any finance because the banks wouldn't lend us money because it was a bit of a crazy idea. We didn't have a brand, no reputation, no contacts in the industry. We just had a lot of passion. And so I always say when I'm doing presentations, that can get you quite a long way. If you've got that passion and you really want to do it, then regardless of all the other stuff I've said, we certainly demonstrated it can make it work. And we went from spare bedroom to where we are today. We have distribution in 80 countries around the world. We have 4 direct offices. So we have office and warehouse in England, just north of London. We're in Soest near Dortmund in Germany, office and warehouse. We're in Bangkok in Thailand. And then we're in same sort of situation in Cincinnati in the United States. So we have our own offices, and then we have distribution. And I think we're probably the biggest in our category at the moment in the commercial fitness space, and most of the major fitness brands that you're aware of will, we work with most of those and have done for a number of years. So I guess, very, very proud of that, and very proud that you'll see our products in a lot of places. I guess one of the key things that you'll see is we do these big, colourful tires that you can do lifts and flips and farmers walks and that kind of thing. But generally, as a company, we're about innovation, and I'm excited about products, and I'm always looking for new, exciting or creative ways to motivate people to want to work out, because working out isn't easy, as we all know. Sometimes even if you're super committed and you've been doing it as long as I have, there's times where it's like, I'm going to struggle to get in the gym today, but you do it because it's part of who you are. But I always imagine a lot of the people that have not been doing it that long and maybe a little bit overweight and out of shape and feel uncomfortable walking in the gym. And so for me, it's about how we can motivate those to be the best that they can be. How we can create the products so they look fun, so they're colorful, so they're easy to use, so they're exciting, and take that workout experience from being something that's painful to do that they don't enjoy to when they come out think that was brilliant. I enjoyed that. I loved it. And so that's kind of how we think about products. And like to pick one out would be quite difficult. I guess it's like picking your best child. But if you go on our website, which is escapefitness.com, you can kind of see a lot of the stuff that we do. Awesome.
Wow. And tell us about the podcast. How did you get into that?
Well, I had a friend who has a podcast called The Disruptive Entrepreneur, and he'd been doing it for about couple of years when we started talking about it, and we had the conversation. I was a guest on his one, and he said, "Look, you really should think about this because it's a great way of meeting people. It's a great way of sharing your thoughts, your ideas, and your experience." And I thought about it for a while, and it took me a year of just running it through my mind. And then I was in Portugal on New Year's Day, going for a run, thinking through my goals, and I said, right, before the end of the year, I'm going to have a podcast. And the drive behind it for me was to think of myself as when I was a teenager, not really knowing what I wanted to do, and not really where I was brought up. There was not really people around me that were inspirational. It was I never, when I was younger, I never wanted for anything, but I also, most people who lived around me didn't have anything either. So it wasn't a problem, but there was just nobody had any sort of money or success. So there was no role models for me to say I want to be like this person. And as I got older, I started to travel and were more inspired and believed that different things were possible. And so with a podcast, it was like, well, if what would have been great for me at that age was to hear about other people that had probably been on my journey, that had done the extraordinary, that have gone on a path and understood what they were thinking about and what they, what some of the steps they took and how they achieved and what went wrong, and just to kind of make it seem as though it's normal, because if you've never done it before, you don't understand this stuff. You don't know that you're going to fail a lot, and you don't know it's going to be difficult, and you don't know how long it's going to take. So it was really just to number one, to give people inspiration. And certainly since we've done it, we've had a lot of people that have jacked in their jobs and started their businesses because they've been inspired by other people. And then the second thing is, as in my sort of position in the company, I do travel a lot. Most months I'm in another place or country around the world, and I get to meet a lot of people. And I thought, how can I make more value out of the time I'm spending away from my family? And so it was really to say, look, if I'm having a meeting, if I'm meeting a great fitness leader or an inspiring person, then okay, let's have the business conversation, but let's also, let's share your knowledge and let's record that and let's sort of amplify that out to thousands of people. And so that was a way of me really thinking about, well, making the most of the time, short time that I have, providing value back to people, telling a bit of a story as well as doing, what I do as my job on a day-to-day basis.
Oh, that's great. So, where can people find you? Like, what's the best? Do you use social media, through the website? Like, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you, find out more about you, your podcast, your company?
Yeah, so if you, our podcast is called Escape Your Limits. You can go to iTunes or SoundCloud or Stitcher. So that's one place. You can, keep up to date with what we do and some fun stuff on Instagram, which is just my name, Matthew Januszek. LinkedIn tends to be a little bit more business focused. So if it's sort of the professional side of what I do, then my name again, Matthew Januszek on LinkedIn. And then if you want to find more about Escape Fitness itself, it's escapefitness.com, and we've got newsletters, and we give away a ton of free stuff, and there's a lot of free workout videos and information on YouTube that we put out on a fairly regular basis.
Awesome. Well, Matthew, thank you so much for coming on the GymWits, and certainly if you're looking for a couple guests for the Escape Your Limits podcast, I'm sure we could have many other awesome conversations. Fantastic.
Well, it's been very enjoyable. Got me thinking about stuff I've not thought about for a number of years. So I appreciate your time, and best of luck with everything that you're doing.
Awesome. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, so it was really cool. Like I said, we were working on our own stuff that we brought up a couple times, and so kind of he had a captive audience for some of that, and it was really good advice. I think we've had interviews in the past where we'll ask people things, whether whether it's for us or just in general, because we're doing interviews, and we got to ask questions, and you'll get some people where they're like vague, and it's almost like they don't want to give away their secrets. And I think Matthew was really generous with his information and sharing. But again, as I mentioned earlier, I'm in a rush, so I got to get out of here, which means we're not going to do any banter or much of a close beyond that, because you kept me here later than.
Well, look, the interview was so good that I think it holds its.
He's lying. It's been an hour since the interview. No, we had some stuff we had to take care of, and calls and stuff, and so sometimes this stuff gets like scattered all over the place.
You're breaking the
fourth wall.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. Well,
bulldozing.
Yeah. We're serious. Well, as usual. All of our stuff is at thegymwits.com, our social media, all that good stuff. Ryan George.
I'm Justin Guild, a.k.a. Chef Sonic, reminding you that truth does not sell.
And we are the GymWits.